morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Kentucky Spin's Tuesday Tips. It looks a little different today because we're actually showing our cameras, and we'll explain that in just a few minutes. But today we're going to be talking about tips on transition into the workplace. I'm Stella Beard with Kentucky Spin. We have Annette Jett with us from Build Inclusion, and so we'll be chatting with her in just a few minutes. Before we get started, I want to just kind of go over a few things with everyone. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a dashboard. On that dashboard, you can, if there's a drop-down box that says questions, you are free to type a question in there. I have Kelly and Michaela on the line too from Kentucky Spin. They're going to be monitoring those questions for us. So feel free to type your question in that box, and we will try to answer them as we go through the presentation today. If you would like, let me go back. The handouts are going to be emailed to you following the presentation today. So we will have those out to you in an email that you can click and download for just no problem at all to do that. So you'll be getting that in a follow-up email from that. If you have any other questions throughout the presentation, hopefully everyone can hear. Hopefully everything is going good. We may experience a little delay due to of course, everyone's internet connection. I live in the country, so every now and then it might be a tad bit delayed. So hopefully that won't be an issue for too many people. I would like to tell you just a little bit about Kentucky Spin before we get started today. Kentucky Spin is the Special Parent Involvement Network. We are the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Kentucky. We're actually funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and Kentucky Spin has been the Parent Training and Information Center, or another acronym in our world, the PTI, since 1988. And we actually just received approval for another 5-year grant. So we will continue to serve families and youth throughout the state of Kentucky, providing information, training, and resources for another 5 years. So we're very excited about that opportunity that we have to continue to work with families. Something that we do not do, that we do get asked a lot about, is we do not act as attorneys. We are not here to give anyone any legal advice or anything like that. Really what we do is we empower families to effectively advocate for their children. We feel like if families feel like they have the right tools and the resources, they can become better advocates for their child, and they can, do better in the IEP meetings if they have those tools and resources that they need. I know Kentucky Spin was a tremendous help to me years ago when I first found out about the resources that Kentucky Spin offered, and I think it's great now that I get to be a part of such a wonderful agency. We provide peer support to help families access needed information and resources. All of our staff and consultants are either parents, family members, have a disability themselves. So that is something that we can say without a doubt that we are able to provide that peer support to help families with resources and information. This next slide is something that we have shown since March. We hit the ground running in March and went to a virtual platform when the pandemic hit. And we have been continuing to do webinars every Tuesday and every Thursday since March. So I can honestly say we have a very extensive webinar video library that you can find on our website, which has many, many wonderful resources in multiple forms of formats. You can find it in video, you can find it in a handout, and everything on our website is free for you to use and share out. But this slide simply says, together we can accomplish great things for our children. None of us have all the answers, and we are all working through this pandemic and adjusting as we go. And I can say that that is something that we have all had to do through this, is just make changes and adjustments as we go along through this. Every single day, it seems like we're all having to adjust in some way. So I'm so excited today to have my friend, I can say that Annette is my friend, with us today, Annette Jett. She is the Executive Director for Build Inclusion, and I'm so happy that she has joined us today, and we are going to have a conversation. That's what we're going to do. Annette and I are going to talk a little bit about transition into the workplace, what that looks like, and we're just going to kind of have a conversation together. So I highly encourage you to, if you have a question about something that we're talking about, please put that in the question box, and Michaela and Kelly are going to assist us throughout today's presentation, and we'll be happy to answer it. So welcome, Annette. I'm so glad you're here with us. Can you hear me okay?
Hold on. Yeah. The phrase of the year, you're on mute. I was still on mute. Sorry about that.
Isn't that the
yes,
truth?
we're glad to be here. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, before we get started, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of your experience, why you do what you do, and tell us a little bit about Build Inclusion, because I'm sure a lot of folks that are either on the call now or that will hear this later on might not even know what Build Inclusion is.
Well, I actually have a daughter who is 15 and 3/4, almost 16, and she was born with developmental disabilities. At the time, I knew nothing about that, and it was funny when you mentioned how you empower families, because one of the first trainings I ever went to was something that you were doing for a different organization, and your name came up a lot. So you've been effective in helping our family figure out what to do and what resources are out there. I ended up going back to school at UK and getting my graduate certificate in developmental disabilities, because I just felt at a loss when she was about 5. How can I help her best? What does transition look like? You know, when your child is 5, you're really just trying to get through the next first grade, second grade, that type of thing. But you really have to be planning ahead, and that was kind of what catapulted me into the whole world of advocacy and inclusion, and really wanting to see better outcomes for not just my child but for others. And so 6 years ago, we ended up opening up a nonprofit, and we focused a lot on education and advocacy. It has since become, I feel like, a leader in the field in Kentucky around helping students in the transition age become successful in their post-secondary with their post-secondary outcomes, mostly in the vocational area. Sometimes we do support people that are also going to take a vocational or an educational route, and then, you know, help them get a job after that. So that was our focus. That's where we saw the gaps in current services, and it really is so much easier to get a student that's coming right out of an education setting into the workforce rather than wait a few years after they've really had no routine, no schedule, felt like no purpose really. It makes it easier to do it initially versus later on, because it's harder to kind of envision what that looks like. So I'm really proud of our staff. We've got 6 people that work with us now. We do traditional supported employment, we do customized supported employment, and we are going to start with individual placement and support, which is called IPS, in July of this year. We also do pre-employment transition services, which is called PREETS often. And we were lucky enough to do a webinar with you earlier in the month about that.
Like
and
a couple of weeks ago.
It works together. It all kind of works together. Those 3 areas that I told you about, the traditional, customized, and IPS, are all forms of supported employment that follow different models, but they're all effective and they all have their place, just depending on who the person is. It's really like you individualize a plan, just like you do in school. You individualize a transition plan for a student or a job seeker.
Awesome. That's awesome. I am turning off my Wi-Fi on my phone. I want to make sure that my bandwidth is good, that we're not, I did see we had just a tiny bit of a lag, which we probably will. So folks, if you see us, our mouths moving, not with our faces, hopefully that won't, hopefully we
We're not
won't have that problem very much. But today I think what we want to do is, Annette and I are both parents, of course. I have a 24-year-old who's almost 25. That just makes me feel very old right now, with an intellectual disability. So what we want to do is we just wanted to kind of have a talk today just about transition, and we just want to give families some tips, really, about transitioning into the workplace, what that could look like. And I think that will be fun. Annette and I love to talk, so we will not have any problem with this format, will we, girl?
No, we won't.
No problem at all. No problem at all. But I know many parents have that concern. What happens after they're out of high school? I used to say this all the time. What's life going to look like 5 years out of high school? Well, guess what? I'm looking at it right now. And I used to say that thinking that it was like so far away. And like you said, you started thinking about when your daughter was in kindergarten. And I wish more families would do that, because transition simply is just moving from one place to another. And our children are doing that constantly, but it seems like there's a whole lot more to think about when they do have a disability. So that's what we want to talk about today. We want to find some tips that we can share with families, so that 5 years out, they're not sitting on the couch, at home, playing on the phone all day. And yeah, there's going to be times for that, but we don't want that to occur, and we want to help families do that. But what do you think is the number one thing that a parent can ensure and can do to ensure that that doesn't happen?
Well, I think that there's a lot of important things, and I'll say, as a parent, the most important thing that I've been able to do is advocate for my child, whether it be at school or with doctors or with, in any type of setting. Parks and Rec, for instance, she's been in an inclusive camp settings before COVID hit, of course. Different places like that in the community that you can continue advocating for your child. But there's actually research. Dan Habib, who's the filmmaker of Including Samuel and Intelligent Lives, I had the chance to meet him. He's somebody that I also have admired for a long time. He said that there's research that says there's two things that can help, that lead to more successful outcomes and employment after high school. And the two things that you can do is, if they have paid experience, work experience in high school, they have a better chance for that out of high school. And the second thing is something that you and I talk about a lot, is having household chores, which is something that a parent really can control to a degree anyway, right, with any of our kids. But really having those, at least having those expectations. And if you don't have those expectations, or there's a significant impact of disability and you need assistance with that, that's stuff that places like ours, Build Inclusion, can help with through pre-employment transition services. And part of that too, I'll tell you, one of the 5 components of PREETS is work-based learning experiences. We have not been able to do those very much since March of last year when the restrictions hit, but those are really good ways to get students out. And when I say students, they are students at that time, generally speaking, in school. But it can also be for somebody that's just already graduated, a job seeker. Get them into a work-based learning experience through a community rehabilitation provider, which is what my company is. They're all over the state. They focus in different areas. If anybody ever had a question about maybe, is there somebody I could recommend in their area, feel free to call me. You can also, I hope that you'll send out my email address with the information. But because that can be difficult, identifying what resources are in your own community, and you're not often told that. You really sometimes just have to dig and dig and dig. But work-based learning experiences is a powerful thing. And I think that they're powerful whether they're paid or unpaid. Of course, we want them to be paid if possible, but just getting that experience of what it's like to be in a work setting, what it's like to work with others, to troubleshoot, to be on a schedule that you're not necessarily just able to walk away from. I mean, we all experience that, right? And I honestly think, generally speaking, everything that we talk about that is good for a student or a job seeker or a child with a disability can also be good for a person without a disability.
Absolutely.
So I have a son that's 20 months younger than my daughter, and I see how all of this can also benefit him. He was actually talking to me last night about when he turns 14, is it okay if he gets a job? So I'm thinking, yes, yes. You know, get a job, figure it out, see how it works. I started working when I was 15. It was just kind of the norm back then, way back then. So those are some things that I can say, you know, having the chores at home, having experiences in the workplace. Oftentimes too, if you're going to do that in the community, it really is good to go through a provider, because most businesses don't want their moms coming, you know, a person's mom coming in and telling them, okay, he can only work this day, and this day. That comes a lot better from a provider who can advocate for your child. And I know that because I used to be a business owner before I got into this. In some ways I still am, because nobody owns a nonprofit, but I do help secure it and run it and make sure that, you know, we have the funds to keep going. So, but I used to be in a catering and restaurants, and that was just a full-time job. I had a lot of people in transition that worked for me at that time, disability or not. So I do know from experience.
You said a couple of things that I want to talk about just a little bit. First, about the chores at home. I think that is, like you said, that is just so important, and that can start early. I mean, that can start way, way early, and it's teaching kids, you know, to be responsible. I know with Clayton, we have a list, and he's very visual, so he wants to see it, and he enjoys checking it off. I have a list right now on my desk. I enjoy checking things off. So I think that is a really good way for families to, you know, start them understanding that responsibility. And, you know, Clayton feeds the chickens, and our deal with him is, if you don't feed the chickens, you know, that's not good for them. Would you like to not be fed one day? So we're teaching him to have responsibility, but also, you know, he started working when he was 16. It was a no-brainer in our house. You're going to get a job. And so I think those that's something, like you said, that parents can do early on. The other thing you said that I want you to elaborate on a little bit is, you said it would be good if they could have a provider. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? Because there might be some families that are going, what does that mean? What do you mean I need a provider?
Right. So what we talked about in our last webinar with you was pre-employment transition services. That came out through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and there were several sections in there that were related directly to students in transition, particularly ages 14 through 21 that are in a school setting. And they were, the provisions in this act said that providers can offer pre-employment transition services, which consists of 5 different topics. One is learning about self-advocacy, one is workplace readiness, one is job exploration, the other is post-secondary or college counseling, and then the 5th is work-based learning experiences. So my company has been doing this for a little over, well, probably about 4 years, because we started a little bit before the regulations came out with some grant funding and that kind of thing. But it's just a really good way to get your child involved at an earlier age than in the past. And what would happen in the past is that the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, who we report to and we are contracted through, they would be invited into the IEP or the ARC meetings like the last year of school. And then they would help that person find, if they wanted to go a vocational route, they would help that person find a community rehabilitation provider that could help them get to that point. We call ourselves CRPs. And the real downside of that was you're walking in senior year, right? And probably the last quarter that they're in school, and you're like, hey, I'm Annette from Build Inclusion, and we're going to help you get your lifetime dream job. You know, there was no relationship already built. There was no information that we had on the student other than what was just in evaluations and reporting. So there was no just hands-on experience of really seeing what somebody is capable of. So my suggestion for every parent is that you figure out what CRPs are in your community. You figure out which ones are offering pre-employment transition services, and if your child is 14, you get them involved now. To some degree, we are doing this, even though we're not really doing most of the services that we're offering right now are virtual, but we do video calls and video group and individualized calls around pre-employment transition. It still is beneficial because it's still getting the material out there to the person, introducing them to the concepts. But the other two benefits that I like the most is that we're able to glean information before we ever get to that senior year that can really be helpful in the discovery period of what this person really likes to do, what they would be good at. And then it builds that relationship with the student. And, you know, if you're in transition age, then chances are your parent is involved, right?
Right.
So we're also, or the guardian. And so we're also building that relationship with them as well, and able to say, hey, by the way, you know, if you want us to come to the ARC meeting with you, we can. What are they doing at high school level to help, you know, build these skills? You may be having pre-employment transition services in your school and not even know it, or it may be offered and your child hasn't been, you know, offered that opportunity. So asking about that, you know, finding that kind of thing out is really helpful. So going to a provider, the provider is the person that's going to follow your child out of school. You do have consumer choice. So like if you have a provider and, you know, somebody makes a match for you, whether it's the school and the provider or OBR and the provider, they make the match and it's not working. I mean, you always have that right to say, I would like to work with somebody else. But what we try to do is make it so that the relationship, you know, becomes valuable and the services that we offer are valuable enough that they do want to continue working with us, because there is value in starting with somebody at 14 and then by the time they're 18 or 21, wow, think about how much ahead of the game we are on what they're really good at. And so, and the other thing I want to say is that a provider is trained to help draw out the strengths and skills, not draw them out, but to really kind of translate what they do, what they like, what they say, and what we see them, you know, doing. We translate that into skill sets and strengths, and we're taught to do that. And particularly with the customized supported employment, I mean, it's like a rigorous training process. And so to be certified in that, it's a minimum of 20 weeks to spend with your learning partner, and inevitably it takes more time than that. So I've been certified in that in discovery and job development. So has our associate director and another person in our group, and everybody that works with us is pursuing that. So we spend a lot of time training for that. So sometimes I'll have parents come in and say, oh, this is my son and he wants to, you know, only work in stocking or only work in, you know, restaurant or whatever it is. Give the provider the time to get to know your child and to use the things that they've learned and the skills that they have in really translating those skill sets, because there might be so many opportunities that you're missing out on. I guess another thing I would say is that when I was in high school and coming out of high school, I did work in the food industry. I actually worked in the food industry for 30 years or more. But I didn't walk out as the manager. I had to work my way up, right? And so does everybody. So having these like when you get out of school, you might hear people say, oh, they shouldn't get that type of job or this kind of job. You want it to be a valued role, but
Right.
it's going to be an entry level job, right? Because there's no experience there, real experience,
Mhm.
generally speaking. And you want room for growth. You also want room to go somewhere else, after a certain period of time. But getting that just experience as an entry level person, that's typical of most people in the transition age coming out of high school. So when my son goes to get a job, he's not going to get a job as you know, a mechanic because he doesn't have that skill set, but he might get a job, you know, assisting somebody in that area if that's his
Right.
interest.
And it can
So
grow
that's just an
into so much
example.
more. It can
Yeah,
grow into so much more.
yeah. So I find, like, and sometimes food and restaurants and that kind of gets a bad rap, like, oh, you don't want your, that's not a valued role. Let me tell you, the most important person that worked in our catering business was the dishwasher. Because if
Mhm.
we didn't have clean dishes, we couldn't cook, people couldn't eat. Um, so, I mean, as important as the people that are cooking the food and serving the food. So I feel like there's sometimes, you know, another thing in restaurants and some of these other types of industries like that, you can learn everything from teamwork to troubleshooting to problem solving and communication and different personalities. And sometimes that's just all brand new to our students and our kids because they have never experienced that outside of a school setting, or maybe in a setting that's been congregated and not as inclusive as some of the other as like a community based work experience, or competitive integrated employment is what OVR calls it, Office of Voc Rehab, because they want to make sure that when we are getting jobs for people, they are competitive and integrated in the community. They're not in a congregated setting. So
Right.
those are just all things. I know I'm talking fast, and I know
No, I think those
I
are
live.
excellent, excellent tips that, and it's funny that you said about the food industry and that, because I was kind of that person. And because I had heard, in my experiences is, oh, you don't let him work in the, in the food industry right off. That's so, it just sets them apart from everyone else. Well, guess what? Guess where he works? He works in the food industry. And it's funny because my big thing I said so many times is, if you've only had a hamburger, you don't know what a steak tastes like.
Right.
So, we started him in that field. We transitioned him into something else in another field that we thought might work for him. And for a while it was okay, but guess what? It did not work for Clayton. And he came to me one day and he was like, Mom, I love my job. I don't want to work anywhere else. So we as parents, especially as advocate parents, have to listen also to our child, our young adult. And when I mean, he was so vocal, Mom, I do not want to work at that place anymore. I want to work here. We have to do that. We have to listen to them. So I think that's real important too. And he's been there for 7 years. And his job kind of changes. He kind of goes from different positions and does different things. And I think that's wonderful. Not that I want him to stay there the rest of his life, but right now he's comfortable and he's doing what he loves. So I think that's very important too.
Oftentimes too, like if especially if it's more of a mom and pop type thing or what, those types of environments, retail, restaurants, okay, they can offer like a family type environment. And so we have some people that work at consignment shops. One person was particularly interested in children, so she started working at a consignment shop for kids. She didn't have the credentials to go right into a daycare setting or something like that, but that's something that we were always thinking about moving her into. But she gets to interact with people, parents and kids and that kind of thing. So those can offer like a family setting. You know, they're smaller. It kind of works really well for her. We have different people that work in different areas. And so I just think that there's some value there in learning that. And if you feel comfortable and you know you're comfortable, again, we're not going to leave somebody sitting for a long time. We also want to make sure that they are getting paid at least minimum wage, hopefully more,
Yes.
but at least minimum wage, and that they're being treated like every other employee. So there are expectations there, you know, if there are staff parties, if there are luncheons or whatever, that person is included, because
Christmas
that's what really makes,
bonuses,
that's what
anything like
really,
that.
yeah, Christmas bonuses, those kind of things. That's what really makes a person, a role valued in our work settings. So I don't look on any job as maybe that's not as good as another job or whatever. I look at the person, I look at their strengths and skill sets and what's going to help them get experience to even get to that next level. So
I love that. That's great, Annette.
some
That's
ideas,
great.
and we are told a lot of different things, and sometimes you just have to kind of, you know, yeah, I used to take offense to that. I'd be like, I worked for 30 years in the food
That,
industry. I learned everything you need
wait
to
a
know in
minute.
the food industry. So I just felt like, you know, I think that's worthy of saying, and hopefully they even get to come back after COVID, because a lot of restaurants had to close and that type of
I
thing.
know. It's very
You know, and
hard.
COVID has offered, you know, some real challenges, and I know that, and you know, I really feel for parents that are in this stage at this time, because it's not typical of what we normally can do, but we still can do things. We have
Absolutely.
gotten people jobs. I mean, probably 6 different people have been placed into different jobs. I mean, ranging from, you know, maybe places like a Lowe's or a hospital setting to HDI. We just placed somebody at HDI. So, you know, probably 6 to 10 job placements from the fall to now. So that's pretty good when
That's
the market
awesome.
is so really very volatile right now.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. Um, you know, I've always heard of, and we use this, we call it like a vision statement or a
mhm.
snapshot. And I think that's also something good that they can create for themselves and share that with their employers, because it lets the employer know a little bit about like how we did it with Clayton. It gave them an idea of what his strengths were, what were some things he might need, you know, some natural supports helping him with at work. And, you know, we provided that to them, and we're going to send everybody like a little sample one in the handouts. And do you all do anything like that with folks that you're working with? Help them create that so that they're able to share that with employers?
We go through just a variety of training, and we get the benefit of being able to work with them toward a lot of goals and that kind of thing. Really, goal setting is kind of, I think, what you're talking about there. And you know, if you think about a resume that you've received or that you've made, you have a mission statement on that, generally speaking, or at least I always have. And that's what I think you're kind of talking about. And so it's not what my vision is for you. It's not what, you know, your parents' vision is for you. What is your vision? So yes, we help, and we end up, you know, that does go on our resumes and things like that. It has to be presented at the right time. I'm not going to do that initially. There is a discovery process that takes place. So let's say your child has just graduated from high school and you didn't know about Office for Voc Rehab, or you never got connected with a CRP. You can ask for services, and you know, you have to go through an evaluation period and become eligible, but then you can start working with somebody, and they're going to start with the discovery process. And that's where we're really diving in and saying, okay, what is it that this person does well? What does this person not do well? Because we all have those things too, right?
Oh,
You know, what are situations or conditions of employment that are going to be best for this person? Like, I can tell you right now that if you put me in a cubicle and there was nobody to talk to all day and I had to sit there from 9 to 5, I would not be successful. You know, I would not. But that's me. So it's like, what kind of environment do you want to be in? You know, what kind of, you know, do you want to be on your feet, off your feet. What are some, things that maybe like my daughter has some mobility issues, so that would be something that we would take under consideration, like more breaks and that type of thing. So really doing this discovery process that unfolds not just job possibilities, but where people are going to shine. And that's what is super important to me. So the vision statement kind of comes naturally after that. It's not necessarily something that we put in writing, but it does translate into the resume. Another thing that we do with customized supported employment, and this can be used if you're taking a different route, and even like, let's say that you're down there in, what is the county that you're in? I forget.
Adair, Dunville.
Dunville,
Adair is our
okay,
county.
yeah, so
Dunville is
Adair.
our town.
So you're in Adair County and you're working with, let's say you're working with the CRP, and they don't have a certification in customized supported employment. Well, one of the things that we can do is something called a visual resume. So we've been taught how to do that. And it really introduces the job seeker to the employer. So effective right now, for instance, during this time, because how many of us really do well on video interviews and things like that? I mean, it's different. It's something that we have to learn, and some people are really great at it, but it doesn't always convey your whole personality. So a visual resume shows probably 5 slides of the job seeker in different capacity building roles that they already do. They're not made up. I mean, it might be them walking their dog. It might be them, washing a car. Lots of things. I mean, we really dig deep, and then we get to write out, some strengths and skills of this person, and so that way the employer can see it. So to me, pictures are more powerful than words, right? And so they can see, oh, I wouldn't have thought maybe this person can do that, but look at this. They're cooking in their kitchen, and serving meals and this kind of thing. And so there's all kinds of things that we can do that can help employers have higher expectations of our students and job seekers as well. And so I think that's really important, because as an employer, if you have not been exposed to disability in the past, you may have that single story in your mind of the person that you met in high school, and this is what you think a disability looks like. Well, it doesn't look like that. It looks like this, or it might look like that, or it might look like something completely different. So, I think that we've all probably been guilty of that in the past before we were exposed. I do always say, like, having access is the biggest key. Access to inclusion and opportunity is the biggest key in any of this, in becoming successful in your community, or in your school, or in employment. And so you're really not, you don't think about access until you're impacted by the lack of it.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, it's true. It's like, I mean, when I was the age of some of my coworkers, the people that are working with me, I lived in Chicago, and just never even thought about it, because I had never been really exposed to people with disabilities. And when we came up back in the day, you're a little bit younger than me, maybe, or I think we're about the same, but
I think we're close.
There weren't that many people in school with a disability. I mean, all of that was coming around, like those advocacy efforts were coming around, and those laws were coming around, but we didn't experience that like other people did. And so I think that you're going to have a lot of employers out there that are the same way. And I think instead of criticizing that, we just need to educate them, and we need to show them, yes, this can work. And so we've had just significant gains in being able to just change people's perspective. And I think that that's a really important thing. But it's easy to go, oh my gosh, how do they not know? Well, that you don't know till you know. So we have to help them know.
Exactly. I love that you said educate them. I think that's wonderful. That brings me to just something that I think a lot of parents might not feel like they need to do this, but talking about the disability with their child. So, or their young adult. From early on, Clayton always knew he had a disability, and we always called it what it was. He has Williams syndrome. We talked about it. We educated him on it. Do you all do anything like that with the folks that you work with, or is it not really anything that's you feel like is important to talk with them about? I think it is
think it's
personally,
not
but I just didn't
important.
know.
I don't think it's not important, but this is the thing. We focus on capacity.
Mhm.
These are the things that you can do. And when they go to get a job, supported employment means that you're actually offering supports on the job. And that can look different for a lot of different people. They have the option of disclosing their disability or not. If you don't disclose it, it makes it a little weird because that you might have a job coach showing up with you or an employment specialist showing up with you. And so sometimes we don't even go on site. Sometimes our support would be just kind of in the background, and then we're having phone conversations with them, or used to be in-person conversations with them, and helping them problem solve outside. So those are called off-site supports. Other times, it's very important that somebody would know that this is my disability and these are the things that I need. So through self-advocacy, we teach them how to do that and how to disclose in a way that, is going to help them, because they'll be able to get the supports that they need. Those supports too, I want to make sure that I say this, is, if you're working with a provider, those supports that you're getting from your provider are meant to fade. We are supposed to work ourselves out of a job pretty much, right? So because we want natural supports in place, just like any other employee has. So you have natural supports, Ms. Kelly, and I think you said Michaela, and other people that you work with at SPIN, and even if you're not in the same room with them at the same time now with COVID restrictions, you have the support from them. I have support from my staff. It's a natural type of thing that needs to take place, and that's what we want for our students and job seekers. And I can liken it to this. There's a lot of people in the education world that would say, oh, my son or daughter needs a one-to-one para. Now, I don't know everybody on the call, and I don't know their situation, and that may be true of some people. But what I found out early on was that if I had a one-to-one para for my child, one, it was like, it would have been an act of God for it to happen because they just weren't offering those kind of things.
Right, right.
Becomes completely dependent on that person, and that person, for reasons that A, they're trying to help, and B, job security, they're going to do as much as they can for the person with a disability. And then also, just one of the biggest things is how many, like, let's say you're in middle school and you have a one-to-one para with you, so you're walking around with an adult. How many other kids are going to want to be your friend and invite you to birthday parties?
Talk about singling someone out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have parents that will say to me, oh, we want a one-to-one para, and I'm like, no, you don't. I don't think you do. Let's just see. I mean, if they need that, yes, I'm not at all criticizing, but it's like that can be a big deal. So that's the same thing when we go into a job site. If we're there and people see us there, then they're going to go, if it's consistent and we're there all the time, and even let's say they're getting to the point where completely independent, and somebody wants to sit in the corner and make sure that nothing happens, that's not supports. That's not supports. What that is taking people to that kind of othering people and saying they couldn't do it without us, and that's not what we're about. We want them to get independent, have natural supports, and have us as backup.
Exactly.
So expect that to happen as a parent. Expect that the employment specialists are eventually going to go away, but they'll be there if you need more help, or you need a new job, or you need some advocacy tips or assistance and that kind of thing. So
that's good. That's good. Well, talking about self-advocacy, I want we've got just a couple of slides that you shared that I think it would be really good to kind of go into that now for just a minute. We have about 15 minutes. And
sorry, I know I'm talking a lot.
No, no, hey, that's what we wanted. We wanted a conversation. But just, we might not go through all of them, but I would like to at least talk about the difference between self-advocacy and self-determination, because I think they can be a little,
Right, it's
confusing to
confusing.
families and folks. And so I think it would be really good. So let's talk about self-advocacy first.
Okay, so self-advocacy is exactly what you see here on your screen, and I'll just highlight the pieces that it involves. But it's learning how to speak up for yourself. It's making your own decisions about your own life, learning how to get that information so you can understand things that are of interest to you, or what I like to say is, making informed choices. It's knowing who's going to support you on your journey. So it's like at home, Clayton has a certain set of people that support him. At work, it's a completely different set of people. So being able to identify those people and know what your natural supports are is very important. It's a part of advocacy. You need to know your rights and responsibilities, and everybody needs to know that in a workplace. They also need to know that at school. They need to know at home, what is your right and responsibility? And so problem solving, listening and learning, reaching out to others, and then learning about self-determination. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll show you how we kind of break it down.
All right.
So that's self-advocacy. And so one of the things that gets on my, gets under my skin is when people just automatically call a person with a disability a self-advocate, because it's just not, that's a skill. It's not something that comes naturally for everyone. And again, disability or not, some people are better at that than other people. Some people really need to learn it, but I do feel like everybody can learn it if they're given the proper tools. So it's the result, and if you'll just hit this a few times, we have 4 categories that we break it down into. The first one's self-awareness. And so this is really just knowing what you want, what you need, what you desire, so that you can make that informed decision and you're not living somebody else's life and somebody else's vision for you.
Or just trying to please someone all the time.
Right. And we do that. We do that all the time. People that are, again, doesn't just refer to people with disability, but I've seen people that do things because their husband wanted them to, or because their parents thought they should, or whatever. So we want to find out what this person wants to do, because that's going to lead to the ultimate happiness for the person. So once you find that out, self-esteem, you have to have the confidence to be able to ask for that. And so building that self-esteem and say, so now I know what I want, I know how to ask for it. Self-determination comes next. So it's a piece of self-advocacy. It is probably the most important piece, because it's about goal setting. So after you have decided all these things and decided to go for it, like mapping out a plan or a goal or something that you want to get to is very important. And that's what I always say, self-determination is just kind of a big fancy word for goal setting and planning.
I love that. Yeah.
I mean, it's just really, when you break it out like that, it's like, oh yeah, okay. And then, you need to, the 4th piece is self-monitoring. So you can have an idea that this is where I want to go, but we all know that plans don't always go as expected. Who would have expected COVID in March of last year, for instance? I mean, we had these big plans that we were going to do all this cool stuff and, at our business, and it just didn't happen. We had actually expanded our offices in January because we were so excited about this new, some new programs we were going to roll out and services, and we had to leave the whole office by July. So self-monitoring, you have to monitor if you're on the right track. If you're not on the right track, why? Is it something where you need to change the goal, or is it just a piece along the path that you need to tweak, or that kind of thing? So I really think that kind of tells you everything that you need to know. If you want to see the definition of self-determination, it is in there. But I think that that's just the foremost things. You can kind of flip through those real quick if you want.
And we're going to send this out with everyone, so they'll have the PDF of this so that they'll be able to, really look it over. And I think it's so important that, we understand the difference in all of this. I think that's very, very important, and just to have an idea about it. So
And
I
I
think
did
that was
touch on a lot of these slides. So this is what self-determination, like the official, definition is. And you'll see varied versions of this. This was from the National Gateway to Self-Determination, which I don't think is around anymore, but it was when I was getting my graduate certificate. But it just says self-determination refers to a characteristic of a person that leads them to make choices and decisions based on their own preferences and interests, to monitor and regulate their own actions, and to be goal-oriented and self-directing. And so that's another thing, in addition to chores and that type of thing. I mean, setting small goals for people along the way. That's when we do this with our students in pre-eds, we set goals, but we don't start at a goal that's like, when I'm 21, I'm going to have a job that's this. We start with a goal that's going to be accomplished within 3 to 6 months.
That's good.
Because we want to see success for this person, because that's what helps build self-esteem. So really one of the components just kind of gradually builds on the other. They're also very transferable skills. It's not just for the workplace, but it does assist in making a more successful outcome in that area.
That's good. Well, I want to pause just a moment and see with Kelly and Michaela if we have any questions. And girls, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right. Do we have any questions out there for Annette?
Yes, we've got a couple. So the first one says, my child is still a young teen. When do I need to begin transition planning, and where do I start?
So young teen, I would say that's 13 or 14. I would start with pre-employment transition services. I would talk to your school, see if they have anything that they're offering there. There's different people that offer them. There's different groups. There's the community work transition program that's run through HDI. There is KCTCS, which has different people that will go into the schools. I don't know exactly how they're doing it with COVID. I would say it's mostly virtual, but I don't know that. And then there's people from the education cooperatives around. There's like 9 of those in our state, and they go also into different places. Now, each of those people have different setups, different times that they go in. So it's not like it would maybe be a really consistent thing. So I would also look for a community rehabilitation provider in your area that is offering those services with pre-employment transition. How to get started, you can either call your Office for Vocational Rehabilitation, which is out of the Kentucky Career Center, the one that's in your area, or you can send Stella or me an email or give us a call. I mean, I'm throwing you out there, Stella, sorry, but give us a call, because if Stella doesn't know, if Stella doesn't know who the person is, then she's going to call me, or who's in that area. And it varies. I mean, there's people from Western Kentucky to Eastern to Southern to Northern. It just varies. We happen to do the Central Kentucky area. So if you are in kind of the Fayette and surrounding counties, even going down, we're going to go even to Madison County starting in July. We go all the way to Franklin. We do Woodford, Jessamine, Scott, Clark. So, reach out to one of us and we will help direct you, get you to a person that does those services in your area. There's also, I should just mention, there's like a branch manager for CRPs, which is what we are. And then there are 3 liaisons in different parts of the state. So if I don't know who your person is or who a good person to refer you to is, I would get on the phone and I would call one of those liaisons and have them reach out, have someone reach out to you. So it is doable. It's while VR services aren't entitlement programs, your student is eligible for pre-employment transition services if they are just potentially eligible. You don't have to go through the whole eligibility process at VR. They need to have a documented disability, an IEP, or a 504. So those are, I mean, we've served everybody from people with visual and hearing impairment to autism to Down syndrome to ADHD. I mean, it just really just depends. we like doing community classes because we have a little more control over how, how much time we have with them and that kind of thing. With the schools, particularly right now with the virtual learning going on, there's not a lot of time in the day to get those done in school. So community classes are a really good way to go.
And I believe you did some, like I remember somewhere seeing, maybe you partnered with the Down Syndrome Association and did some really good life skill classes.
Yeah, that was the beginning. Like when I said, we did something with some grant funding. We did start with a group of 6 students at the Down Syndrome Association, and we came in and worked our curriculum through their We Work program. They do a little bit of a different type of thing now. They still offer those kinds of services, but I'm not sure exactly which curriculum they're using at this time. And most of our classes are actually offered in a cross disability environment. And we find that's really, so we do have some people with Down syndrome that are in there, but just having a real mix of people, impact of disability,
Absolutely.
levels of disability. It's not, that's a lot of what we do. And we find that makes it a little more inclusive for everybody. I mean, but anyway, yeah, we had a great time working with Down Syndrome Association, and there were several of those students who are now employed, if they've been out of high school and that kind of thing, or they're job seekers that we've worked with and others have worked with.
That's great. That's great. I think we have another question, Michaela or Kelly.
Yes. So it says, can you get transition services outside of school?
Yes, you can. The pre-eds is one that I could say for young adults. I mean, for young teenagers. But once they're 16, transition is built into the school programming. So be thinking about what some valued roles are for your student there, and really work with them. Like, my advice would be push the envelope there a little bit. They may have like certain jobs that they have, okay, like you can clean the cafeteria or you can do this. Well, that's not going to appeal to everybody. And just because the person has a disability, I don't really think they should be put in that position. So, think out of the box. One of the things that I'm doing at the new school that my daughter's at, she's at a K through 12 school. So we have already talked about next year her walking in and as one of her classes being able to assist in the room, in the like kindergarten room, and actually run a station. That's what they call them, because they do different activities throughout the day, a station, or do some reading or that kind of thing. Things that, because she likes kids and she's done some of that before in the past. And so we're exploring that opportunity around childcare and daycare. And so if she's getting that experience now, she might come home and say, oh, it was awful, I hate doing that. But I don't think that's going to happen. At least we're thinking a little bit out of the box, and her teachers were 100% on board with that.
That's
so
great.
yes,
and that is definitely thinking outside of the box and sharing that with the educators so that they're able to think out of the box sometimes too.
They were as excited as I was, and and Gracie was excited too. So, so yes, you can get. So when you say transition services, can you get them outside? So also, when your student becomes of the age that it's time to do a person-centered employment plan and all of that, your VR counselor will hook you up with a community rehabilitation provider, and we are required to do things in the community. So we can't go through schools to do the discovery process and all of that. We can meet you at the school. That might be where the initial contact happens, but it's really a community-based activity. Job development is community-based. Again, VR is looking for the outcome of competitive integrated employment. So that means that we have to be out there in the community finding things to do. And we've had to be innovative, just like every other CRP, about how to do that virtually. But I've had people that our staff has teamed up and done cooking, like they all have the same recipe and they're cooking with the person that they're doing discovery about. And they'll be cooking all at the same time on video and really learning and being able to communicate. So there's a lot of relationship building still going on and a lot of information that we're still being able to collect.
That's great. Well, and then I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
So I think if there is another question, Michaela.
Yes. This one starts with a comment, but it says, I think it is really valuable that you are a parent as well as a professional in this industry. Can a parent or individual request to be served by Build Inclusion specifically, or does Voc Rehab have to choose the organization that the individual participates in?
A good question.
Well, one, thank you. That's very, that makes my heart feel good. But it is consumer choice. So if you want to be served by our organization, you can request that. And, unfortunately, we're not in every county. That would be the only downside of that. I would love to go statewide someday, but that hasn't happened yet. So if you're in one of the counties that we serve, and then, there have been times, honestly, that somebody has said, I really want to work with Build Inclusion, and Voc Rehab has picked up the phone and said, you're not scheduled in this county, but could you do it? And right now would be an easier time to do that anyway, because all our services are virtual. So yes, you do have an option. And if you do want to work with us, we would love to have you. And I would do everything in my power if I felt like it was going to work. And, I know the areas that we're going to be expanding into, so it might be a really good time, to do that. Also with the classes that we do and that kind of thing, there's really no reason other than me just getting permission through VR to service people in pre-employment transition services virtually if you live in a different county. I mean, everybody's getting on Zoom anyway, so that can happen anywhere. That would be the one good thing that's come out of COVID, is that we've had to learn other ways to do things, and we've had to be innovative. And these are things I hope that we'll take into the next round of how we actually offer services, because I think it adds more flexibility.
People seeing that now, it's like, wow, look what all can happen when it has to happen. So
and the other thing is technology skills. This is where everybody's going to technology, and so the people that we worked with have really improved their technology skills over time. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little rough in the beginning because you'd have multiple people on the phone at once or on different devices and trying to get into the same portal, and it was like, whoa, but it really has been good. So in short, yes, if you want to work with us, please give us a call and let your VR counselor know that, because we would love to work with you.
And as you said, even if you can't, you can possibly refer someone that you feel like would be a great match.
Right, and we do have relationships with multiple other CRPs that we have ongoing conversations with, and we're all trying to do best practices, and I just think that that's important too, because we can't possibly serve everyone, and so I think that raising each other up and making sure that everybody's doing what needs to be done for the good of our students and job seekers. I think I said this earlier, but it's about outcome, not income. And we certainly, we all have to pay our bills, but we also want to focus on that outcome, and everything else will naturally fall in place.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, this has been so great. I kind of like this conversation style. I think it worked really well. And I just appreciate you, and thank you so much for being our guest today. And I'm so glad our paths crossed years ago. Just Annette and I actually held the same job at different times. So that was kind of how we met. And I think that's pretty cool that we've stayed friends all this time and have been able to bounce ideas off of each other. And I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. And with that said, I just want to let everyone know we do have an evaluation that will pop up at the end. And if you will take a few minutes and fill that out for us, it certainly helps us plan for future webinars, but also just kind of lets us know how we did and give us your honest opinion. And so thank you all so much for joining us. You will get an email later this afternoon with everything we've talked about today, the PowerPoint with some additional handouts that we didn't go over, but we want to be sure that you have those resources. It'll have Annette's contact information. So if you do want to reach out to her, you're going to be more than welcome to do that. So thanks again, Annette, and thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope everyone has a great day. Bye.
so much. It's a true pleasure. Thanks,
Bye.
Stella.
See
Bye,
ya.
everyone.